Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. I've got a very, very special guest with me today. And before I bring him on, I just want to let you know that if you are ever inspired to give your TED-like talk, or if you just like to take your leadership and communication to the next level by learning some great techniques based in human evolutionary biology and neurophysiology, and then honing those things so that they're super useful to you in sales meetings, in conversations, in TED-like talks and everywhere, go check out the Speak Like a Leader experience. It's an 8-person cohort-based 10-week course, and we do all of that and more. You can find the next upcoming release of that at ed.executivespeakingsuccess.com. That's ed for education.executivespeakingsuccess.com. And now I'm really thrilled to introduce someone who means a lot to me. When I met him, he was the old guy in new media. And he was working at GeoCities. Before that, he worked at Chiat Day. Before that, he worked at a number of agencies in Chicago and LA. He had something to do with airline miles rewards programs, which he can tell us about. And he's actually a retired captain in the US Naval Reserve. He was on active duty for 3 years and in the reserves for 21 years. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. And this is the guy that I hired to be my boss when I had my company, bigwords.com. I'll never forget the first time that I really got to sit down with him. His name's R.B. Hackenberg. And I remember I reached out to him. It was the early days of the internet. He was the old guy in new media. I was working at a place, I think, called Virtual Vegas at the time. And I said, would you just sit down with me and have lunch? I'd just love to meet you. And so he came and we sat down and we had a really nice conversation. And at the end of that conversation, I said, you know, my parents love me and they want to do their best for me, but they really don't understand the world that I'm living in and you know, new media and what's coming with the internet. And I think that you really get it. Would you be willing to be my mentor? And I remember he looked at me and he kind of gave me a smile and he said, well, John, I think, you know, I'd probably get more out of that than you would, but I certainly would be happy to do that. And, you know, now it's, gosh, how many years later? It's like 20 plus years later. And here's RB Hackenberg on Speak Like a Leader.show. Welcome, RB.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Yes, I'll always remember our lunch. And
yeah,
I'm flattered I was that you wanted me to be helpful. And I think we both benefited along the way. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm sure I did. And I'm just really glad I took a lot of courage, you know, because you worked at, I think at the time you were either at Chiat Day or GeoCities. I think I'd maybe seen you make that transition.
I was at GeoCities.
You were the old guy in new media, and GeoCities was crushing it. And
well, it was a top 5 website at that time, believe it or not.
Yes,
it was. It got swallowed by Yahoo, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, you know, boy, there's been a lot of churn from those days. I mean, I think I think it's almost flattering to call that Internet 1.0. I think that might have been some Internet beta something, right?
That's right. Pretty much. Yeah.
Well, so, you know, you have a long and storied history as a leader, and I have been there by your side watching you lead. You know, we were working together at Big Words for a number of years. And I just wonder, who are some of the people that influenced you? Like, I was always really impressed with your leadership style and your ability there. And I just wonder we never really got a chance to talk about this, I think, directly. Who were some of your big influences, and where did that stuff come from, would you say?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how one acquires leadership skills. Certainly, you can take courses and you can, uh, you know, learn by example by people you know.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it was the United States Navy. I
Very likely.
I think
Yeah.
I learned more about, for me, it was sort of like back in the day, there was a draft, and it was sort of like I was not interested in being on the ground somewhere. And so
Uh-huh.
I decided to go to officer candidate school and
Uh-huh.
get commissioned and be on a ship. And
Uh-huh.
it was one of the best decisions I think I've ever made. And you
Yeah.
learn what, sort of like what to do and what not to do from the
Yeah.
various commanding officers that you have.
Yeah.
You do learn both sides of it. And
Yeah.
so, like it or not, the military has some tried and true processes, procedures, programs. And as a junior officer, you fit in. And before you know it, you're writing performance evaluations on chief petty officers who are twice your age and
Yeah.
more important than you'll ever be. And so
Yeah.
you try to decide, well, is it me? Is it him? What about this characteristic? And you
Mm.
learn through introspection as well as observation and experience. So to me, the military is one of the great lessons in my life. And what you learn is it's as fundamental as the old, I think it was Farragut or one of those great old admirals who said, "Take care of your men." That's what
Yeah.
you do. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Don't do
Yeah.
anything else. If you don't do anything else, do that. And
Yeah.
when you do that, you succeed.
Yeah. It just makes me smile because I can, overlay that on the time that I spent watching you lead. And I get that that's a driving force.
Well, and the thing is
So,
that you got to remember, how everyone wants to act, everyone wants to excel, everyone wants to be important in whatever role they're playing. You have to let
mm,
them do it, even if
yeah.
it's a little bit risky. Let
Yeah.
them have their head. Let them learn. Let them lead. When they lead,
Yeah.
you lead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, on this show earlier, I did an interview with my dad, who, as you know, was a captain in the United States Marine Corps,
Yep.
and he talked a lot about that, knowing your people, and he talked about the mistakes, some of them deadly, that he saw other officers make in not letting their people do their jobs,
Right.
and wanting to be the one to do it and thinking they were so important. And so I think that that's a big lesson. Another thing that I remember you talking about and marveling about in your way is I remember distinctly a few different people that you got to meet and talked about who are, could be considered leaders. And I remember one of the things you would always say about the really great ones is, oh, he just loves people, they love people. What do you think about that in leadership?
Well, absolutely. I really feel that any kind of team environment has to be based on mutual respect and really basically just fondness, feeling, and really caring about someone. And when you
Yeah.
do that, it comes back.
Yeah.
It's reciprocal, and then it's cohesive, and then the team excels. It just will,
Yeah.
and it's all based on positive thinking and motivation, and allowing people to do what they want to do under the guidance of the objectives and whatever the strategy is to achieve whatever goal you're seeking. But
Yeah.
my feeling is that a positive person liking others can really excel.
Yeah. I fully agree. So, what are some of the moments that you had some challenges? I'm sure throughout your career, maybe in your Navy days. I'm sure at other times. Are there any times when you like learned a really important, hard lesson out of a difficult experience in your career around leadership or otherwise?
Uh, well, let's see. There's always the the time, I suppose, when you're in a quandary. In other words, you are working on something and you aren't necessarily achieving the progress that you had hoped to achieve. And you're
Yeah.
working with others and you're trying to
Yeah.
motivate the rest of that team. And you then sort of have to, if you're not sure what the outcome is going to be, but you've got to, 3 days from now is the presentation. You've got to
Yeah.
you've got to let it go, and you've got to know that it will come together. And so sometimes just letting go and let it happen is a great way to achieve a result.
Yeah, it's something that I do think is something I see both in you and in my father a lot is that, and I do think it probably there's some military roots to this, but that I can just picture both of you standing there kind of maybe stepping back mentally one big step and just looking at the whole situation and just kind of letting it unfold and maybe wanting to jump in, maybe wanting to do something, maybe wanting to fix this or touch that, but letting it go. And I think that's such a difficult thing for so many people to do,
It is because most people are controlling almost
Yeah.
almost by human definition. You want to
Yeah.
get it, and especially I think it's true of males, maybe
Hmm.
females as well. You want to
Hmm.
control the situation. If you have a
Yeah.
responsibility, you want to run it. You want to be in charge.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes it's better just to step back. I remember
Yeah.
once there was a young guy. This was in another agency, and he was a traffic guy. And traffic guys move stuff around through the system, the ads, the commercials,
Uh-huh.
whatever. And I was supposed to take something to a client, and I had a big conflict. So I said to the traffic guy, I said, "Why don't you take this over to the client and present it?" He said, "Really?" He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, just go do it. I know you can do it. You're smart. You know that you know who she is. Go do your thing." So he goes, gets it all done, gets it, brings it back. It's all approved. Everything's fine, right? The head of the office says to me, "Did you send a traffic guy to make the client presentation?" I said, "I did." He said, "Why did you do that?" I said, "Because I knew he could do it and he was successful."
Yeah, that's really great. That's really, and I got to imagine that that had an enormous impact on him, right?
Totally. That's the other thing. When you believe in your people, your team, they
Yeah.
believe in you, and you can through positive example, through mentoring, through leading, you can turn someone into an extremely confident, effective person. I've
Yeah.
seen it happen more than once. I've been around
Yeah.
the block a few times, and I've always felt that let just as I learned in the Navy, frankly, because
Yep.
junior officer, all of a sudden you're officer of the deck underway in a multi-million-dollar ship, and you're running it,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
22 years old or 25 years
Yeah.
old or whatever. Well, you better know
Uh-huh.
what the hell you're doing, and you better believe in others, and you better be a leader.
Yeah. 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 Wow. Yeah. It's pretty wild. I mean, it's very wild. And if you have any questions about whether that human being, somebody that young, somebody that in whatever, like look at the military, look at what kids do, you know,
There you
that's a whole
go.
bunch of kids,
Yeah.
to old men like you and me. Right. Um, I think that you were a big influence on me in this. One of the things that I say in my training and my coaching with executives and leaders all over the world is speak to them like they're great, no matter how they're acting in the moment. Keep standing for your people's greatness. And you don't have to step over that this is a bad result, right? You, let's see. I think our connection got
Well,
slightly unstable. Hopefully, we're both okay here. But
okay.
so talk to them like they're great. And if they're getting bad results, say, look, these results are terrible. You're brilliant. How do we get your
Well,
results
that's
to
another
match?
thing. That's another thing. You've got to, in mentoring and leading, you've got to recognize opportunities for improvement. I
Mm.
remember once that I had an account exec, very smart, very capable, but she had some kind of interpersonal things. Conflict,
Hmm.
conflict resolution was not. She wasn't a star there. And
Yeah.
so I said, "Listen, you are really good. You're smart. You know what you're doing, but in dealing with others, you've got some problems, and you could be so much more effective if you could manage those relationships. So I think you should take this course."
Mm.
And off she went, and she took a 6-week course in communications, conflict resolution. She was a whole new person. She
Yeah.
became a different person because
Yeah.
someone took the time to point it out, provide a solution, and she just thrived.
Yeah. Well, and you started by saying, look, you're really smart and you
Yeah.
got all these things licked, and here's a place where you could do better, right? And when you do that, and I watched you do this with so many people, myself included, when you stand for someone's greatness before they fully get it themselves,
Yes.
when they finally get it themselves, boy, they'll never forget that you saw it before they did.
Very true.
You know,
Very true. And
that's
the other thing too, John, is I think that you have to encourage people to be very open, hopefully tactful, and hopefully kind, but to be
yes.
open about their thinking and their issues when you're having a dialogue. I'll,
Mm.
I'll always remember the first ad agency job I ever got. I had been in a training program at Sears in Chicago, the headquarters, and I
Oh.
decided that wasn't for me. So I was going to go work for a hot agency in Chicago. And I went through I had to go through all the different interviews. This was almost an all day event. Finally, I got to the guy whose name was on the door.
Uh-huh.
And it turns out that guy was the third, I believe the second or the third Heisman Trophy winner in U.S. football history. He had been a he had
Wow.
been a running back at Yale, and so now I'm in his office, and he's looking like he could go play right today, right? And he's probably at that
Yeah.
point 40. So I'm looking at him, he's looking at me. He's giving me the same thing about, well, you're a smart kid, but you don't really have a lot of experience. And he said, I don't know, we have to think a little bit. I said, pardon me, with all due respect, I'd never heard of you until 2 weeks ago. He sat back in his chair and he looked at me and he said, I guess we're both taking a chance. Be respectful, but tell the truth. My God, man,
Yeah,
what are you thinking about? People
that
regard
is,
people regard that extremely well.
yes, they do. And when you can do that with some tact and some sense of humor and yet be really straight up and honest, that is awesome. I had never heard that story. That's a great one, RV. That's so good.
Well, it shows that you're comfortable. It shows that you can stand with
Yeah,
anybody. It shows
yeah.
that you are resourcul, that your brain is
Hmm.
working, and
Yeah,
it sort of takes it eases everybody.
yeah.
He was having a problem trying to decide, is this kid smart enough or whatever. I was trying to decide, oh man, I got at that point I'm thinking there's nothing to lose here.
Hmm.
I can leave.
Yeah, right. What are you going to not get the job? He's probably not going to come hit you or anything, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was, and we had a great rapport. He was a very good
Yeah.
guy. Yeah,
Well, and look, because you started it off on a note like that, right? Like, what a great, I bet you guys had a great rapport.
we did.
And,
By the way,
so,
sort of related to that, the late Charlie Weeks, such an incredible drummer for the Stones. In
Charlie Watts,
Sorry, Watts. I'm sorry,
yeah, yeah,
Charlie
yeah.
Watts.
No, it's okay.
In in the New Yorker this week, apparently after some big gig, Mick says in a drunken state, calls his room and says, "Where's my drummer?" You know what Charlie did?
Yeah. What?
He got up, he put on his best Savile Row suit, he splashed a little cologne on, he went to Mick's room, he walked past Keith, and hit him in the face. Don't you ever call me your drummer again.
That is classic.
Respect, man.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
That's a real digression.
no, but it's a great story. I've heard that story before
Yeah.
too. That's a great story. And it does kind of fit, you know,
Well,
and sorry, go ahead.
no, you keep going. It's exactly right. It's part of human interrelationship.
Yeah.
It's got to be,
Well, you
there
know,
has to be some parity, you know?
well, and it's one of the things, RB, I had a huge breakthrough in this about 10 years ago or so. And I was doing these presentations where I was kind of getting judged on my presentations and it wasn't going so well. And I kept not accomplishing the result I wanted to accomplish. And I was such a good presenter, but it just wasn't working right now.
Yeah.
It's just awful. And there was this woman who was coaching me, and I would go to her after every failed attempt and just be like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't tell me I'm okay. Should I even be doing it? I'm not worthy. Oh, you know, I'm like, and then one day I was walking to talk to her again after yet another failure. And it really hit me. That is not what she needs from you. You know, this is not you're not like, what are you doing? Right. Like if General Patton gets gets beaten in a battle, he doesn't go to the president of the United States and say, "Oh, tell me I'm still a good general. I'm not okay. I don't," you know, he's going to look and see what went wrong. He's going to figure out how to fix it. He's going to go tell the president we got our noses bloodied, but next time you can darn well bet, you know, right? So like people want to be around people that are up to something with them, not somebody who's 7 levels below them. You know, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Right.
I had a client back in Chicago, a really great guy. I really like this guy. He was a good leader. He was like a group product manager or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Anytime a product manager came into his office complaining or asking questions, he would say, "Get out of my office. I hired you to bring solutions, not problems and questions."
Oh, that's a good one.
And guess
That is
what?
a
They
really
all learned, oh, I better go in there with solutions and answers.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy, that's a good one. That's a nugget
And
right there.
it builds confidence because the person realizes, oh my God, why am I whining? Why am I complaining?
Right.
I'm going to go solve the problem and come back here right away.
Well, it's a great illustration of what I think my realization in that moment was too, right? Like there's just there's zero value I bring anyone by holding somebody in such esteem that they're better than I am and I can't even talk to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, people certainly want to be respected, and if you think they're super cool, great, you know. I mean, I've met people that are famous before and said to them, "Hey, listen, fanboy moment. I'm a huge fan, blah blah blah. I love what." And then like, "Okay, done. Right now. How are you?" You
Yeah.
know?
Now let's
And
have a conversation.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, for people that are raising money, it's the same thing. I mean, at first I remember I would go in and my feeling would be that I was hat in hand, you know, may I have some more, please, you know? And then it dawned on me at a certain point that like they've got money. Money is not their problem, right? If I'm trying to raise money and I'm talking to the VC guys, they've got money. That's not their problem. They're not hung up about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have an idea, a company, a thing we're up to. And if they had that, they have the money to do it if they wanted to, right? But they don't have that idea. They don't have the desire to do it. They're looking for something that's just as valuable and important as what I'm looking for. And if I walk in and we can be collaborators, that's a whole lot better than me standing there hat in hand saying, "Can I have some money, please?"
That's
you
right.
know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's cool.
Those days of chasing venture capital in Sand Hill Road and then back in New York were pretty exciting days, John.
They were pretty excited. I mean, it's definitely was an era for the history books, huh?
Indeed.
I remember driving up and down Highway 5 in Matt's little roadster, just going to make another pitch,
Yeah.
And I do remember I think kind of a breakthrough for us was when we stopped worrying so much about the PowerPoint deck, and we would tell people that we were pre-PowerPoint, and then we would draw it
I'll
out for
always
them on
remember.
a napkin.
Yeah. That to me is, I've used that quote when Matt looked at everybody in the eye and said, we're a pre-PowerPoint company, and the venture capitalists went, oh, I get it. Totally disarming.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that and that kind of thing is the thing that I think it is so scary, and yet it's the thing that makes the difference.
Never forget it. You're not going to forget a story like that. How many times did those guys sitting there tell everybody they saw for the next 2 months, I just had a guy come in and say he's a pre-PowerPoint company.
Yeah. It's so funny. We're pre-PowerPoint.
Yeah.
That was really funny.
That was all that. Yeah.
That was really funny. So, what are some of who are some of the leaders that, that you've worked with or that you haven't worked with, but that you know of and have learned from, that you look up to?
Well, immediately somebody comes to mind who was a giant, and you learned both the pluses and the minuses. I never actually worked with Steve Jobs, but I read Isaacson's book, which I recommend to anyone if you want to study an American icon, who on one hand was a remarkable leader, and on the other hand, he was kind of a jerk. And I guess it depends on who you were and what kind of rapport and what your relationship was. But that guy, I have a high regard for what he was able to achieve in his lifetime.
Oh boy!
I know that he unfortunately he treated a few people poorly, so it shows that we're all human. But I think that some of the leaders that generally rise to the top in any kind of industry or endeavor, people who write books often are good leaders. David Ogilvy in the ad business wrote a couple of books, and he was brilliant, and he was a great leader. Here's a guy who was basically, he was not really a businessman per se. He was a writer. And when he left England to come to the US, he made a list of like 20 clients. And he said, I'm going to get all these clients. And over time, he did. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He went to them. He knew something enough about their business to be able to convince them that they should trust him. And he got all those clients. That's beautiful. That's just doing your homework and knocking on the door. I met a young guy. This is a leadership lesson from a novice in a way. I remember one time a guy wrote me a letter looking for a job. And in his letter, he said, I've attached my resume, but since really you don't get an awful lot out of a resume except a profile, he said, I've gone ahead and scheduled an appointment with you for next Thursday at 2:00. I did that with your Did I see him? Of course I saw him. I said, how many interviews are you getting? He said, about 1 out of 3.
Yeah, at least, huh? That's awesome.
Yeah. His resume just didn't end up in the pile. He demonstrated initiative. He demonstrated leadership without even being a leader yet.
Yeah.
He was just out of school.
Yeah. Well, I love what Simon Sinek says about, right? Like there's leaders, the ones with the structural title and stuff. And then there are those who lead.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter, right?
Very well put.
Yeah.
Very well put.
Yeah.
No, so I think anybody in any endeavor, I mean, leaders are not always, leaders can be both good and bad, sadly.
Sure.
But generally, I think the leaders who care about others. Well, let's put it this way. There's sort of fundamental things, right? First of all, be kind. Second of all, tell the truth. Third of all, work hard.
Yeah.
If you do that stuff, you're going to be a leader.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, kindness just of course,
Yeah.
telling the truth,
Yeah.
an incredible challenge sometimes, especially when it's a difficult truth that
Who
might,
knows? Who knows? It's tough.
make people
There are tough
right.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just work hard.
And work
I
hard.
love
If
it.
you work hard,
Yeah.
people are going to work hard with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Mirror neurons, right? I mean, people are going to mirror you as a leader. You get the kind of followers that you're putting out
Right.
because the people that show up and mirror you are just going to be reflecting back your leadership on some level.
Now, there was a guy that I used to work with. He was the head of an office of a New York based agency. And I always remember something he said that really cut the wrong way.
Mm.
Talked about hiring some people and a particular individual. And he said something like, well, he's really not one of us.
Wow.
Well, if that isn't a red flag, you don't want that.
Uh-huh.
You don't want that. You want
Yeah.
individuals. You want people who are
Yeah.
going to contribute, not one of us.
Yeah. 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 There's a flaw already in just having that be the thing.
Not a good leadership trait.
No. No. The other thing that I always got from you, RB, and that I think Ogilvy is someone that you would mention to me on a regular basis about this, but another big aspect of leadership, and of course I'm going to say this, is communication, right? And being a good communicator and how you choose to communicate and yeah, I do remember I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember you sharing a number of really brilliant things that Ogilvy had to say about that. I don't know if any of them stand out for you right now, but um, as a writer, his whole thing was communicating,
Well,
right?
I
And in a
can't think of anything either other than to say that the Confessions of an Advertising Man is worth reading. You could probably read it in about
yeah,
2 hours, and you'll
yeah,
learn more. You'll learn more from that book than you will from many others.
yeah. Confessions of an Advertising Man
Yeah,
by Ogilvy.
yeah, and it's an old book. I mean, it's been around forever.
Yeah. 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 You've certainly mentioned that to me. And you know what? I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to go get it and read it. I'm getting old enough to be wise enough to know that I could probably use it.
Oh, it's simple. It's well said, plain spoken, and it sort of gets
Mm-hmm.
down to this business about just being a good person and thinking
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
mentoring and realizing that your success is based on all those around you. You don't
Yeah.
do it. You don't do it. It's the team.
Yeah.
It's the team. It's whoever you're working with.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I think is kind of a conversation these days, right? Is all these people who I think fool themselves that they're self-made, right?
Oh, I
And
love that.
I mean, like, there's just like anyone who thinks they're self-made, like, has already scored very low on the self-awareness test, you
Totally.
know?
No, it's
Um,
true. It's true. When you think about, well, people have lost sight of the commonwealth, of the common good.
mhm, yeah,
If you can get back to the common good, sharing, working together, building on each other's good work and good ideas, everybody
yeah,
wins. That's the old
yeah,
saw about a rising tide, raises all ships. And so that no one makes it on their own, period. They may have a brilliant idea,
no,
but how many others and other circumstances and other services and other aspects really made it work? I mean,
yeah.
it's never I don't think it's ever a single person. Maybe Tesla is an example. I don't know, but
But I mean, even Tesla was standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
that's right. Well,
And anybody that started a company in the internet age, they had to type on a computer somebody else made. They
that's
hit
right.
send and
Totally.
some service carried it across the wire or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
like there just ain't no such thing. And what you just said reminds me of a book, and I don't know if I've mentioned it to you. I think I may have mentioned it on the show, but it's worth mentioning again. It's one of my favorite books of all time now,
Yeah.
RB. It's called Survival of the Friendliest.
Ah, good
And
title.
it's by a guy that I really respect named Brian Hare.
Hmm.
And he used to study uh primates, right? But then he decided to study dogs because dogs are more human intelligent than even the most intelligent primate. And for example, if you sit any bright primate across from you and you have, a bowl turned upside down on their favorite food, let's say, and then you look at the bowl without moving your head or pointing or anything, you just look at the bowl that it's under, they won't get it. But a dog
The
would
dog will
easily
get it.
get
Yeah.
that. Yeah, totally get that, right? Well, so that led to what's called the cooperative eye gaze hypothesis, which later led to this realization that, and this theory now, that what happened in the upper Paleolithic, there were a lot of other species of humans. There were Denisovans, there were Neanderthals. I've got quite a bit of Neanderthal in me. I don't think I should brag, but more than most people on 23andMe by a long ways. So, there were all these different species of humans. And then in the upper Paleolithic, something happened and all the rest of them vanished. And Homo sapiens took over the world.
Interesting.
And it turns out that there is a very good argument to be made that what happened is we self-domesticated. And one of the big aspects of that, probably the biggest aspect of that, is that we developed the ability to be kind and trust each other in larger and larger societies, right? Like most of the, like before that, it was like just our little tribe, right? But then Homo sapiens, like if everybody started to get together and we all wore the same clothes and stuff, like you could go way over there, meet a whole bunch of people you'd never met before, but y'all have the same clothes on and now we're friends, and so the ability that we got to cooperate and to be kind to each other had us just take over the whole planet.
Oh, it makes sense. And wouldn't it be nice if we got back to it?
It would be really nice. It would be really nice. The thing that I
tribal,
didn't real
look how tribal things are now.
Well, RB, it's actually in a lot of ways it's worse than I even realized until I read this book. What I didn't realize is that oxytocin, which is the love hormone, right? The bonding hormone, that's the chemical that, when a mother's nursing, lots of oxytocin. When you and I shake hands, lots of oxytocin. So people have been talking about it as the love chemical and the bonding chemical. The problem is that there's a dark side to oxytocin. It is also the chemical that allows us to commit atrocities once we dehumanize another group.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
That's oxytocin too, right? So double-edged sword. And it comes down to dehumanizing. That's how genocides can happen, is that people start dehumanizing another group. And the minute they're dehumanized, they're just like blanked out of our brains as humans and awful things happen, right? Which is why I'm really interested. I'm watching very carefully and trying very hard not to support anything that uses dehumanizing language, which is tough in the political arena.
Well, it's pretty rampant, and your description pretty much sort of explains the mass shooting incidents that have really, really escalated in the last 10 or 20 years. I mean, it's back to positive oxytocin.
Yes, let's go back to positive. There is that upside of oxytocin and the bonding chemical. And what it really, the main point is we are a collaborative species, and what allowed us to do what we do now and, just completely arise out of the upper Paleolithic is our ability to cooperate. And, it's our eyes have whites in our eyes. We had to give up being sneaky so that we could see where each other were looking so we could more easily cooperate. That's why we have whites in our eyes. And it's not even a variable trait. It's that important, right?
Well,
That's why we have whites in our eyes.
and the only animals that look us in the eye really are dogs.
Our dogs.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's
And they can read us that
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it's pretty fascinating, and it's so fundamental, isn't it, to leadership? Look how much we can learn not only from each other, but look how much we can learn from wolves.
Yeah. Say more.
Wolf packs, they're amazing.
Yeah.
The strong,
Yeah.
the strong leaders, the alphas,
Uh-huh.
they lead from behind. The weak old people are out in front. Old creatures are out in front. They don't want to leave anybody
Uh-huh.
behind. They take care of
Yeah. Oh,
they take care of their pack.
yeah. And packs are essentially very much like family units.
Of course.
Wolves don't typically run in like big groups of
Yeah.
individuals that don't really know each other. They're family groups. And I think that's also, I think, a good overlay on leadership
Totally.
and work. I'm working with the folks at HKBN, which is a big company in Hong Kong, and they have a similar philosophy, RB, but I do like this twist. They're like, yes, we want to be like a family, but even more than that, we want to be like a high performing sports team family. You've got to be willing to show up to practice, and you've got to be willing to really give it your all, because we are trying to perform at an elite level. And if you're willing to do all that stuff, then of course you're like family,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good metaphor. It's been around for a long time. I remember the first time I read anything about that I became aware of was a thing in I think it was a Harvard Business Review, God, decades ago, called metanoic behavior, beyond the mind. And it's the whole idea of its best example is basketball. It's the no-look pass. He's there.
Yeah.
He's there.
Yeah.
You can't see him, but he's there.
Yeah. Yeah. And to get that kind of functioning on a team in business is just amazing.
Well, and
it's working
right now. Baseball, the San Francisco Giants have the best record in baseball because of team play. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's unbelievable. They love each other.
Yeah.
You can see
who is the quarterback that just won the Super Bowl that again? Is it?
Oh, you're talking about oh, come on. The
everybody listening is going, they know.
The guy that was in Boston forever and now he's in Tampa. His name.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, I'm going to look it up here. But Tom Brady.
Brady, that's it.
Yeah. So now look, he's old.
Yeah.
Right? For a quarterback. He's also, if I'm not mistaken, he has more Super Bowl rings himself than any individual team in all of football, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, here's the realization that I had. I'd love to know what you think of this. That to me says he knows how to build teams.
Agreed.
Because I think that he could go almost anywhere and win a Super Bowl. Because it doesn't matter who's on the team.
He can still do it in his 40s. The guy's unbelievable. Not my favorite player, but I have to respect him.
And the thing I love the most, exactly. I mean, yeah, like I'm with you on that. But when I had that realization that in order for him to have that many Super Bowl rings, he's got to have something very, very powerful that he brings to just kind of a normal group of players turns them into something, right?
I agree. He's a leader.
Yeah, that's leadership. And I really, really got very inspired by that aspect of it,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. He proved it. He went to Tampa. Within 2 years, he won the Super Bowl.
There you go. Right?
Not much more to be said.
Yeah, right. Enough said. That's leadership. That's leadership. And I think that he knows he's not a self-made man, right? He's not a self-made guy.
He couldn't do it without those other 10 guys.
That's for sure, right? It becomes a little more obvious in his situation. But I think it's the same thing for everybody and anybody.
True.
Very
true.
But it becomes really obvious when you're the quarterback. Like if those linemen weren't there for you, it would be a hard day.
That's right. Well, he even persuaded his former receiver to come out of retirement. Gronkowski, the fabulous tight end for the Patriots. When Tom goes into Florida, he says, "Come on, Gronk." And Gronk says,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Okay. For you.
For you, we'll win another Super Bowl. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so RB, is there any other aspects of leadership and communication that are on your mind that we haven't gotten to yet?
I think we've covered it, John. I think the idea of being positive, being kind, being truthful, working as hard as you can, and frankly, not don't overwork people.
Yeah.
People need to have lives. So it's the idea that it's not, you don't leadership is not staying until 9 o'clock at night.
Right. Right.
Leadership is getting out of there by 6.
Yeah.
And maybe
Well,
go ahead.
you introduced me to the guys at Gold Star, and you and I worked with them. And then I went on to be the first employee at goldstar.com. And that's one of the things that those guys, I think, had really dialed. They would show up. They'd expect everybody to show up on time. We would turn the crank as hard as we could for a nice full day. And then they would walk around. And if people weren't gone by like 6 or so, they would be like, get out of here, go to your family, come back tomorrow. Right. And that has led to just ongoing long-term success.
Does.
I think that's knowing when to go home and do something else.
You don't live to work.
Right.
You work to live.
Yeah.
And you got to have a life.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. One of the things that I've come to believe very strongly is that it's not success if it's not fulfilling.
There you are. Yeah, one of the things I learned along the way when I used to go on a lot of business trips is I would take an extra afternoon if I was out of town and just go to a museum.
Yeah.
I'd finish up the business and I'd say, okay, I got a flight later today and now I'm off to a museum.
Yeah. You encouraged me to do that. You encouraged me to put a little extra time on either side of the things and do that. And I think I'm not quite as highbrow as you because I would go to craft breweries.
Well, that's okay too.
They're like museums.
They are like museums.
But in all seriousness, I would do that. But I would also, when I started traveling for my current job, I would put a full day on one or the other end of my trip, and I would go just see the city I was like, look, I'm too old to just go see the inside of the Marriott again.
I remember way back in the day, there was a movie star being interviewed by Johnny Carson. And I always remember, I don't remember exactly who it was, but she was quite popular. And she said, 90% of what I do to survive. 10% of what I do for my soul.
That's really good. That's really good. Well, that I think could be a good note to wrap it up on.
Fair enough.
Because I think that that 10% for your soul is just an absolute key.
Exactly.
An absolute key. And being kind and telling the truth and working hard. Mm-hmm. I love it.
All right, man.
So listen, thanks for taking the time with me. And I think I've said it before, but thanks for taking the risk that it was to come be my boss at Big Words.
Well,
that amazing time we had.
It's been a good ride, John. Let's keep it going.
Let's keep it going, RB. Okay. And listen, thank you for joining us today and for listening here on speaklikealeader.show. RB, we'll have to get you back here again and hear some more of your raconteur tales. Okay. I really, really appreciate you doing this.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. You too. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.